Hello, my friends. In this video, we will present to you two scary and terrifying stories. Here is the first story, the story of the ghost of the Wild Night. Dr. Edward Morton, a professor of natural sciences, decided to organize a campaign to hunt ghosts, and he was keen to supervise all the details, as for him it was like a military plan. And his campaign included 10 men, technicians, sound engineers, and photographers, in addition to experts in supernatural phenomena. Absolutely, that any phenomenon requires study and must be subject to the rules of scientific research. And he was fully prepared to make every effort to reach the results achieved in this way. The story. In the spring of 1947 AD, Dr. Morton led his campaign to study the strangest phenomena in the field of metaphysics. He chose an old house in the beautiful English Cotswolds, and that house was called Potterton Hall, and it belonged to one of the industrialists there, and that man spent most of his time outside England. And he declared his desire to sell that house and the lands around it, and he agreed that Dr. Morton would carry out his research in that house on the condition that he not destroy it until he completed the sale procedures. The story of the ghost of the Wild Night. It was common among the people that this house was haunted by ghosts, and it was said that the ghost who visited that house was the ghost of the Wild Night, who was the knight who owned the old house, and who returned to his house one night in anger when he lost his money in gambling, and ended up being killed his young wife. And it is said that while she breathed her last, she cursed him, saying, "My tortured soul will remain imprisoned in that house as long as there is stone upon stone in it." After his death, there were many accounts of his ghost appearing throughout that house. So Dr. Morton thought that house was the most suitable place to conduct his research and study procedures. Dr. Morton set up motion picture cameras, sound recorders, and a set of photographic machines on easy-to-move tripods in the large room on the ground floor overlooking a balcony, which is said to be frequented by the ghost of a wild night. But for a whole month nothing happened. The first appearance of ghosts, and in the first week of July, at 10 o'clock in the evening, the microphones distributed throughout the house began to transmit to the speakers in the room that Dr. Morton had taken as a center for some sounds. So they turned the recording devices, and there were sounds of laughter and the footsteps of heels high off the ground. One of the research personnel was watching the house from the outside when he saw lights shining from the windows of the upper floor of the house. And at midnight of that day, each of the researchers was standing behind his device. So a ghost of a man appeared in one corner of the room. The cinematographic camera turned around, and the cameras began photographer in taking a series of pictures of him. The ghost was at the height of manhood and dressed in clothes dating back to the middle of the 17th century. And he walked between the researchers heading to one of the doors leading to an adjacent room. And immediately the researchers dragged their machines and devices to that room. And Dr. Morton and one of the researchers were following through the cinema cameras. What is happening? And witnessed the unbelievable ghost of the Wild Night. A blonde girl lay on the floor of the room, and she was crying with a burning heart, and a dagger dripping with blood was erected over her head, and the ghost who entered the room held it. So the girl tried to get up, clinging to the ends of the man's dress, but he slipped away from her. After that scene was over, Dr. Morton developed a small sample of the film, and the objects clearly appeared in it. The next day, Dr. Morton left the house heading to London, carrying with him a can of the film tape. But he did not try to reach the laboratory, as the car overturned on its side. For some unknown reason, it caught fire. Supernatural appearance. When the ambulance arrived, the car was found charred, and inside it was the body of Dr. Morton, who seemed to be trying to escape from the car, with an open film box in his hands, and the flames devoured its contents greedily. And although the photographs showed a side of what happened, the search movement was lost. supernatural phenomena, and important evidence and support. Story 2. When I was young, there was an old building in our street. All the children in the area kept away from that house because there were rumors about it that it was haunted, and the concrete walls of the old two-story building were cracked and crumbling. The windows were broken and shards of glass lay in the ground around it. One evening, as a test of courage, my best friend and I decided to explore that old abandoned house. We came up through a window at the back of the building. The whole place was filthy and there was a layer of mud on it, wooden floors. And as we looked up, we were shocked to see that someone had written "I'm dead" on the wall near the ceiling. Maybe it's just some teenagers trying to scare the kids, said I. My friend replied kind of nervously, "Yes, maybe." And we explored more rooms on the ground floor. And we found a room that looked like it was a kitchen. And we found more writing on the wall. We read, "I am in the room upstairs." We walked up the stairs to the second floor. I led the way and my friend followed behind me. I was not afraid. And when we reached up the stairs, we turned left and walked carefully. And at the end of the hall was door closed with some writing. "You will find me in this room." My friend was trembling with fear. He told me that he did not want to go any further and did not want to continue. He was very afraid. I was like that, but I did not want to show it. But I also insisted, saying to him there was nothing to be afraid of. I turned the knob and we heard the door creak as it opened. We entered the room and found it empty. There were 2 closed doors on either side, and there was even more terrifying writing on the wall. We read, "My head is on the left and my body is on the right." And as soon as my friend saw this, he completely lost his balance and screamed and turned his path to run away. I grabbed his arm, but he shook me and ran out of the open door. I heard his footsteps disappearing opposite the entrance. I was determined to be brave and overcame my fear. I mustered all my courage. I opened the door. I walked to the right and walked inside. I walked to the other side of the room, and on the wall I wrote a little message which was, "My body is below." I looked down on the floor. I was standing on some writing on the floorboards. I walked over again and saw the words, "My head is in the room behind you." I turned around. I heard behind the door a scream. As soon as I turned, a shadow was moving behind the door. Suddenly something entered the room. My friend's head was severed. The bright eyes were still staring at me and screaming in terror. I quickly threw myself through the open window and fell on my feet. The ground, I fell on my side and broke my arm. In terrible pain, I ran broken into the house, crying and screaming coming out of me without feeling myself. The police were called and they searched the old ruined building. At first, they didn't find anything. There wasn't even any writing on the wall. They combed the house from top to bottom, but there were no traces of my friend. And then they lifted the floorboards. His body was under them, but they never found his head. Translated from the story, Writing on the Wall. If you liked the video, do not forget to like and subscribe so that we can continue to provide new things. Thanks and